Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let's implement the last module, which is presentation layer under authentication feature. As usual, create a new module, Android library. Its name is presentation, copy authentication feature, package for this feature, and hit finish. Delete those two lines, switch to project, presentation, build Gradle KTS, delete plugins, activate compose for this particular module, and delete dependencies. We're going to use Kotlin Compose, Android library, and Kotlin Android. I'm going to apply shared Gradle plugin, activate Compose for this module. Under dependencies, I'm going to add initially health and core. I'm going to sync the project initially to have the autocomplete. Let's switch back to Android, and we have the presentation here. For the rest, I'm going to use here authentication feature domain, compose, and core UI. For testing purposes, I'm going to add the data layer, Android test data, and presentation module, Android test implementation. Let's sync the project. And the presentation, we have to create the composables for our presentation layer. Basically, we're going to do here the user menu, login section of our application, the register section, and the toolbar. Let's start with the most simplest one, user menu. It's going to be a new composable. Let's call it user menu. It's basically the same thing that we have done under the web version of Pocket Goods. Let's wrap everything within a box, and we need to create the button that's going to represent the user menu that has the background primary, and it should be clickable. I'm going to add here a shadow of 6 density pixels and the circle of the shadow, circular shape, as well as the shape of this particular box. Just before moving forward, I'm going to add here a package. I forgot to do here components. I'm going to move this user menu to components because usually we have to maintain pretty much the same structure as the other features. Let's add here a box with a modifier. Let's customize this box. It has a shadow, as I said before, a background primary, and the size of this composable 40 density pixels, and it has to be clickable. Now for testing purposes, I'm going to add here some semantics, the content description. In order to access the content description, we have to add here the context. Let's choose, for example, the content description toolbar user menu to identify this particular composable. Let's place everything in the center of this particular box. What should be presented inside the box is just a normal text containing the initials of the user. Therefore, I'm going to add here a property for the composable. Let's call it initials, and we have to show the menu. For Jetpack Compose, in order to show the menu, that's why I have wrapped everything within a box, so the menu should be underneath this particular button. Underneath, drop down menu, and we have to provide the expanded. Let's create here a state. I'm going to use here remember savable, and assign the value is expanded. On this makes request, we will set is expanded to false. Whenever we click on this particular button, we need to set is expanded to true. If you do remember in Vuetify application, whenever we click on this user menu, we will get the latest data from our API call. Therefore, we're going to hoist this method to the parent composable. We're going to call it onClick. You can do it here, onClick, create a coroutine scope, launch, onClick. We're going to load, first of all, the data and call is expanded to true. Basically, we're going to load the data and show the user menu afterward. Now let's come back to the definition of drop-down menu and let's define the menu items. We're going to use the composable drop-down menu item. For the modifier, we need to set the content description for this particular user menu in order to be accessible in our end-to-end testing. For the text representing this drop-down menu, it is a composable. It's going to consist basically of a normal text showing the label my wishlist. And let's define the style of this particular text, body medium. The method is going to be triggered once clicking on this particular menu item. Let's hoist this method and call it on wishlist click. For the leading icon, do for example book heart that we have done previously under Vuetify. And I would like to add the trailing icon, which is a composable. It's going to be a badge. I think it's a predefined composable. The content or the container color, error color. For the content, just a simple text showing the wishlist count. I'm going to hoist the state wishlist count, integer. inside the badge, a normal text showing the wishlist count. I'm going to fold this section, another drop-down menu item. I have added the content description to be accessible under the end-to-end test. For the onClick method, we're not going to do anything here because once clicking on this particular train icon, which is a composable, we're going to switch the dark theme on and off using the theme switch that we have defined under core UI. Use train icon and place here the theme switch that we have already defined. And the theme switch has two dependencies or two states, is dark theme, and a method is going to be called whenever we are switching the dark theme. So let's define those two methods here and hoist those two properties. Let's use the theme switch here. I'm going to fold this. I'm going to separate between these two drop-down menu items and the logout drop-down menu item with a horizontal divider. And let's define this logout drop-down menu item. Basically, it's very simple. It's going to have one leading icon showing the logout icon. We need to hoist the method on logged out. I'm going to call on logged out here. I have prepared a preview for this particular composable. I'm going to run basically the preview. This is our user menu. Let's click on this particular button. So our composable is good. This is the intended outcome. And we have to continue the rest. As we have done previously in the web version Vuetify application, we have grouped everything within a single package. I'm going to call it Auth. All the components related to authentication and register are going to be grouped under one single package. I'm going to call it Auth. Under Auth, create a new health view model, Auth view model. And it's worth mentioning here, I'm going to proceed differently this time. I'm going to group everything with one single view model. It's going to make our life easier this way. We need to define the state. What are the states that's going to be used? And what are the events that should be triggered? For the states, we only need to store here the authenticated user. Pretty simple, with a default value of null. For the auth event, it has a method or an event that should be triggered as soon as the user is authenticated. We're going to refresh the data, and another event, we're going to set the authenticated user to the current user. And under the Vuetify application, we have defined an enum for form type. Let's add it here. Enum class. Let's call it form type, login form, and register form. And now let's implement our auth view model. As usual, the auth view model needs the use cases as well as the dispatchers. Let's define the auth state, which is basically a mutable state flow. This is the private state, and we have to expose this state flow in order not to allow the composable to tamper with the data of the state flow. Let's add here a current job as we have done previously under the product view model. Now let's define the list of the events that should be handled by the auth view model. I'm going to call it auth events. And we have to implement refresh user data. For the other one, set authenticated user, we're just going to update the state, and we have to pass, we have to update the previous state with the newly created authenticated user. First of all, we're going to cancel the job, create a new one by doing use cases, get authenticated user on each, switch to the dispatcher's input output, launch in view model scope. Let's call this parameter resource. When resource, if it's a success state, we're going to get the authenticated user. Error state, we're going to call on refresh failed. For the other states, we're not going to do anything. I'm going to group everything within a package. I'm going to call it login, and another one for register, and another one for toolbar. Under login package, let's define the login form events. Basically, the events that should be implemented here under auth view model and use them in the login form composable. As usual, it has to be a sealed class. First event, which is the login event, it is a data class login form event, and we're going to hoist the method on error whenever we have an error during login. The other events are related to email change and password change, basically the text input change for the email and password. Another event which is going to control the alert message. If you do remember, under the Vuetify application, the user provide wrong credentials. The application shows the user an alert with some animation telling the user that we have provided the wrong credentials. We're going to define an event here that's going to take care of this. We're going to call it setAlert. It takes in parameter a message and whether it should be visible or not. And we have to control the visibility of the password, toggle password visible. That's all for the login form event. Let's define the state of our login form. It's going to be a data class, call it login state. And from the previous application, Vuetify application, we can infer the different states of our login states or the login form state. Let's do the same thing for the register. Let's create the register form event. We need two events to toggle or to control the password visibility of the password and confirm password. With the same manner that we have done in the login, we're going to control the visibility as well as the alert type. But this time we have two options, or we have two states, whether it's a success state or an error state. And we have to provide into the argument the message parameter. Before that, let's create here a new enum class. Let's call it register alert type. It could be success or error. And we can safely here declare the event, another event related to register function or the register use case. And we're going to hoist the method on registered as well as whenever we encounter an error. And for events related to the text input change for first and last name, email, password, and confirm password. The last event, we are not inventing anything right now, which is basically to reset the fields, first name, email, password, and password confirmation. Let's declare or define the form state for this particular register form. It is basically a data class register form state. And again, with the same manner, we can infer the state that we have used previously in the Vuetify application. Let's come back to the Auth view model. First of all, I'm going to create the state related to login. It's going to be called login state and the register state. Let's define the onLogin event as well as onRegister event. Underneath on Auth event, I'm going to add here onRegister event. Now we have a lot of functionalities and functions that we have to implement. Let's start with the onToggle confirm password visible. This one is very simple. We're just going to update the state of register state is confirm password visible to the opposite. Let's implement onRegister. First of all, we need to check, as we have done previously under the Vuetify application, we need to check if the form is valid. Hence, we're going to create a method that's going to allow us to check whether the value of the form is valid or not. Let's go ahead and create a new private method. It's going to be called isValidRegisterForm. Basically, it's going to return a Boolean, and we're going to use the validator class, helper class that we have defined previously in the core module. I'm going to create here a new value. I'm going to call it email valid, which is basically the validator is valid email. I've just checked the validator, and I think that those methods is valid password and valid email should be within the companion objects. Basically, those are static functions. Register state, value, and email. With the same principle, we're going to validate the password confirmation, and password inputs are the same. And another validation for the name. To say that we have a valid form or valid register form, we need to return email valid and password valid, confirm not empty, password matches, and name long enough. In this case, our form is valid. Let's come back to onRegister and use this one. If is valid register form, we're going to proceed. Let's cancel the previous job and assign a new one. The job basically is from Kotlin view model scope launch, because we don't have in this function any flow to deal with, under the dispatcher's input output. First of all, we're going to update the state and to set is loading to true. This will make the progress indicator visible under the button or the progress button that we have defined under core UI. Let's wrap the whole thing with try catch. In case we have an exception, we're going to call the function onError. And finally, we're going to update the isLoading to false. Within the try block, we're going to call the use case register, and we have to provide the full name, email, password, and password confirmation. Afterward, we have to call onRegistered, pass in the name of the newly created user, and call in onReset. Let's go ahead and define onReset. It's going to initialize everything. We don't need actually the exception. Let's mark it with underscore. Let's move on. This is very easy actually. Basically what we have to do here, we have to update the value of first and last name, and we have to run the validation. With the same manner, let's implement on confirm password change and run the validation for password confirmation. On password change with the same manner, since we are dealing with two forms, let's check first of all if we are under the login form and form type register form. For the first one, we just want to make sure that the password is not empty. On the other hand, for the register form, we're going to check if the password valid and the new value should be assigned from on password change. Now for on email change, and again with the same manner, we have to handle both cases, login form and register form. For both cases, we need to make sure that it's a valid email, whether under login form or register form. Let's implement set alert. We need to handle form type login form and form type register form. For the first one, we're going to update the visibility according to the value from the set alert function and assign the message. And for the other one, which is different because we are gonna deal with the alert type error and alert type success, we need to assign the visibility, the text that should be shown, as well as the alerts. Toggle password visible. It's very easy. We're going just to switch or to handle both cases for the register state and login state. Now we have just one function to handle here, which is the login function. With the same manner, we have to define another method that's going to allow us to check if we have a valid form or not. Let's go ahead and create a new private function, call it isValidLoginForm. In this case, we're just going to make sure that the email is valid and the password is not empty. We have to check if is a valid login form, then we can proceed. First of all, we're going to update the state of the loading to true. This basically is going to allow the progress indicator to be shown under the progress button. And we have to cancel any previous job. We need to surround this block with try catch. And we have to call here on error, pass in the exception as an argument. Now let's focus on this section under try. Let's assign a new job. Current job will be use cases, login, because it's a flow. We need to provide here the email and password on each. I'm going to switch to the dispatcher's input output, launch in view model scope. And because this is a stream of data, on each emission, we have a new user from the database. And I'm going to update the state of the auth state. And if there is any error, I'm going to call here catch. Let's rename this to throwable, for example, on error, and pass here the throwable. And let's update the state is loading to false. We have one catch here, a problem to deal with. The login function is going to emit a stream of data. This is good for our case, but it represents a problem. When the user is successfully authenticated, we want to show, for example, a snack bar message telling the user welcome, as we have done previously under the Vuetify application. To solve this problem, we need to create a one-time event that will be triggered only one time when the user is authenticated. Therefore, we're going to use a mutable shared flow. It's going to be the event indicated that the user has successfully authenticated. Of type user, I'm going to initialize the replay to 0. And the value that's going to be consumed under our UI, let's call it login success event as shared flow. Underneath update, we're going to do login success event and emit the user. This emission is going to occur only one time. If we have, for example, updated the wishlist for this current user, it's going to be only triggered once. So if you want to deal with one-time event, you need to use this kind of flow under coroutine. If we don't do that, let's say, for example, we don't want to use this approach. Let's say, for example, under login, you have added a new callback function. Let's call it on logged in. Don't worry about the errors. and you do, for example, on logged in, I'm going to comment this, and you do on logged in, and you pass here, for example, the user in parameter. Let's add here user, and you pass the user in the parameter or in the arguments. What's going to happen? Every time, for example, when you go into toggle a product on and off from wishlist, this function will be called. It consists of showing the snack bar message. Therefore, you will see another snack bar saying welcome, for example, username, which is not good. That's why we have opted for this particular option, which is basically a one-time event. It's going to be triggered only once, which is great for our case. This is the only trick here under login. But if our login use case does not emit or does not return a flow of data or a stream of data, we don't have to do this. We only going to use callback functions. But since we have a stream of data, whenever the stream changes, this block is going to be triggered or this block is going to be updated. In other words, whenever the stream changes, we have a new user that's going to be set or assigned to the state of auth state. Basically, auth state is going to change whenever we have a new product to the wishlist or we have removed a product from the wishlist. That's why we have used, again, the one-time event technique. That's gonna wrap up our today's video. For the next tutorial, we will implement the login form composable as well as the register form composable and the other section with the toolbar. And for the toolbar, I have decided to do its own view model and its own states and events in order not to overwhelm this Auth view model with a lot of functionalities. It's going to be very hard actually to maintain. It's already crowded with definitions and implementations. We're going to stop here. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next tutorial and happy coding.